Hi, my name is Nathan Tingler. Today I would like to give you some pointers to help you improve a part of your snare drum playing that you use pretty much every time you play the snare drum, and that's your snare drum roll. Now, first off, what's the purpose of the snare drum roll? Why do we roll on the drum? Well, the purpose of the snare drum roll is to create a sustained sound. What's a sustained sound? Well, when you think about what other players do, woodwind players, brass players, string players, they can play short notes, but they can play notes that go for a really long time. That's called a sustained sound. On the snare drum, we can't really do that as easily because when you play a note, you play it, it's there, and then it's gone. So the only way for us to simulate what other players can do is to roll on the drum. Now, interesting thing about the snare drum roll is that it's made up of a lot of repeated notes. And if you're not careful, those notes can be very uneven. That's not a sustained sound, that's a sound that changes. So, we want to create a sound that is as even as possible. How do you do that? Well, first off, let's talk about the mechanics of how you actually roll on the drum. First thing is the grip. Now, I use a 3-finger grip. That means I use my first finger, my thumb, and my middle finger. That's wrapped around my fulcrum point on the stick, and this is where I'm going to add pressure in 2 different ways. Some people use a 2-finger grip, just the thumb and the first finger wrapped around. That works, but 3 fingers is very, very stable, and I find that I can roll longer, I can roll louder, and there's a lot of other things I can do when I use the 3-finger grip. So that's something to consider in your own playing. Now, once you have the grip, how you're going to make the stick bounce is 2 things. You're going to squeeze and you're going to press. A combination of those 2 things will get the stick to bounce. When you squeeze with your 3-finger grip and when you press the stick into the head, it goes from this to this, to this, to this, if you squeeze too hard, and if you press too hard. Now, the next thing that you want to do with your snare drum roll is decide what type of roll do you want to play. There are 3 different types of snare drum rolls. There's the double stroke roll, the triple stroke roll, and the multiple bounce roll. Each one of those has a very distinct sound, and thus it can give the music a little bit of a different character. Double bounce, triple bounce, and multiple bounce. Each one of those has their place in different parts of music, so you want to have each one of them in your tool bag so you can pull it out and use it whenever you need it. I have a good exercise that I learned from my teachers on how to actually improve my roll. So you start out with 4 beats, okay? You can put a metronome on, you're going to have 4 beats. The first 2 beats are going to be triplets. Triplet, triplet. The next 2 beats are going to be the same triplet, triplet, but with a roll pattern on it. So either the double bounce, the triple bounce, or the multiple bounce. Let me do it with the double bounce. So you've got triplet, triplet, bounce-a-lit, bounce-a-lit. Okay? You're going to do that twice. Now we're going to do 4 beats of triplets and 4 beats of the rolled triplets. Okay? So So this is how it goes. Then you do the whole thing over again. So I'm going to play it twice through. Now, in order to build the evenness in your roll so that your roll sounds like a sustained sound, what you want to do is isolate the hands. Now, what I mean by that is I'm going to play this same exercise, but I'm only going to do the bounces that the right hand plays. The left hand is not going to play any of the bounces. Listen. Now, what I'm listening for is to make sure that every single one of the double bounces that my right hand plays is the same as every other one. Because if any of my double bounces in my right hand are different, then the roll is not going to sound even. There's going to be some little blips in it. So I'm isolating the right hand to work on the right hand. Once the right hand sounds very even, then I'm going to do the same thing and work on the left hand. Okay? Then I put both hands back together. Once I've isolated and made each hand even, then when you put both hands back together, the roll will be even. Now, you're going to do a lot of different rolls. Soft rolls, loud to soft rolls, soft to loud rolls, loud to soft rolls. You want to practice each one of those, and you can use this exercise to do that. Let's say you want to do loud rolls. Let's say you want to do soft rolls. Let's say you want to do a roll that goes from soft to loud. Okay? So you want to practice all of those. Then once you finish doing different volumes, you want to practice them at different speeds. Slow speed, medium speed, fast speed. Turn your metronome on and go crazy. Turn on some music, have some tunes in your head, and just go nuts with it and practice this as much as you can. Once you've done that with your double bounce, then you go back and you do the same thing with the triple bounce. Same exercise. Okay? And we're going to go through the same process. We're going to isolate the right hand and make sure that every single one of them is a triple bounce and it sounds the same as every other triple bounce. Then you do the left hand. Once you've mastered the double bounce and the triple bounce, to do the multiple bounce, all you do is start with the triple bounce and then press a little bit harder. If you're doing it correctly, you'll hear all of a sudden this little underlying buzz to the sound. Listen to the difference between the triple bounce roll and the multiple bounce roll. Hear that little buzz underneath? All the extra bounces that you squeeze in there create that buzz. And they're an indeterminate amount of extra bounces, which is why I call it the multiple bounce instead of calling it the quadruple bounce or the quintuple bounce or something like that. So there's 3 rolls that you have. You've got the double bounce roll, the triple bounce roll, and the multiple bounce roll. And that exercise that I just used, you can use to isolate your hands and practice each one of those 3. Once you have all 3 of those, then you've got 3 different sounds that you can use. Now, when you want to apply your snare drum rolls, the first thing that I always tell my students to do is take the bounces out and figure out what the skeleton of the roll is. Now, what do I mean by skeleton? Let's do this. I've got a measure of 4 quarter notes, and the 3rd quarter note is a roll, okay? So if it's a roll, we're not gonna do this. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're not gonna do that. Usually you do something like this. So even though that 3rd note, that roll is a quarter note, we play something different with our hands. That's something different. If you were to take the bounces out, I call that the skeleton. So there's multiple different skeletons you could use. Let's say you want to do 8th notes. When I put the bounces back in, it's going to sound like this. Now, that doesn't sound like a sustained sound. So for each speed that you're playing at, you are going to use a different skeleton for your roll. For this speed, I'm probably going to use 16th notes. So my skeleton of my roll would be this. Practice that, practice the skeleton, then I put the bounces in, and I decide if I'm going to do a double bounce roll or a triple bounce roll or a multiple bounce roll. For this one, I'm going to use a triple bounce roll. Okay? Let's say you wanted to try a 5. Practice that, make sure that the skeleton sounds good, then you put the bounces back in. A different skeleton can also have a different character. Listen to the difference between a skeleton of 16th notes and then a skeleton that's a 5-tuplet. Now the 5. Has a slightly different character. Each one of these is useful, and you can find some piece of music, something within a piece of music that you're doing that can use each one of these. So you want to practice each one of the rolls, and then practice coming up with different skeletons for each one of your rolls. If you're having trouble figuring out how to make the roll last as long as it needs to on the page, try some different skeletons. I hope this helps you, and happy practicing.